Letter to my older self. The rain had been falling since dawn, not in torrents but in a patient drizzle that softened the world outside Elias's window into watercolor. He sat by the old oak desk that had been with him since college, its surface marked with scratches that had outlived their stories. In front of him lay a blank page, and beside it, a pen that felt heavier than its weight. He was 41, though sometimes, in quiet mornings like this, he felt both 17 and 70 at once. The idea had come to him during one of those sleepless nights when time felt elastic, stretching between what was and what might be. He would write a letter to his 60-year-old self, not a list of goals or resolutions, but a conversation across time, an anchor to keep him from drifting. He wrote the date carefully, his handwriting steady but softened by the years. To my 60-year-old self, he began, and paused, feeling the gravity of those words. He wondered who that man might be, whether he still lived in the same small house with the lemon tree in the yard, whether the ache in his knees had worsened, whether he had kept his promises to himself. He imagined grey at his temples, lines that came not only from age but from laughter and worry. He imagined solitude, too, not loneliness, but the kind of quiet that came after years of learning to sit still with one's thoughts. As he wrote, memories came in waves, not chronologically but in fragments, the way life really unfolds when you look back. He wrote about his 20s, the restless years when ambition burned brighter than reason. He wrote about the first book he tried to write and never finished, the way he had once believed success would fix everything. He wrote about his mother's hands, how they trembled slightly when she poured coffee in the mornings, and how she told him that love was never loud, it was in the steady things, the waiting, the listening, the staying. He smiled as he remembered Mara, his first great heartbreak. She was the kind of person who loved everything in the world too much to stay in one place. They had met in a library when he was 22, both reaching for the same book. He remembered how they talked until closing time, how they believed that connection was enough to defy distance and time. But life had its quiet way of teaching him that love wasn't always meant to last, it was sometimes just meant to teach. He wrote about her gently, as if handling something fragile. He thanked his older self for remembering her kindly, not bitterly. He then wrote about the day he met Clara, the woman who would become his wife. There was no grand beginning, no cinematic confession. Just a borrowed umbrella, a shared cab, and laughter that felt like sunlight breaking through grey skies. Life with her wasn't perfect, it was full of dishes left unwashed, late-night arguments about money, quiet reconciliations over tea, but it was real. When she passed away 8 years later, the house became too quiet. He stopped playing music for a while. He stopped writing. For months, he moved through life as though underwater. But time, that strange, relentless healer, nudged him forward. He began writing again, not because he stopped missing her, but because he learned that missing someone could coexist with gratitude. He paused, the pen hovering above the page, then continued. "I hope you still remember her voice," he wrote. "I hope you still talk to her sometimes, not out loud, but in the way memories linger between thoughts." The rain outside softened into mist. Elias leaned back in his chair, his gaze drifting to the garden beyond the window. The lemon tree swayed lightly in the wind. There were new blossoms on its branches, white against green. He remembered planting it with Clara, how she had said, "It'll remind us that life can grow again." He smiled faintly. Maybe she had known something he didn't at the time, that grief, too, could bear fruit if tended with patience. He wrote about his daughter, Isabel, now 17, living half her life through the glow of a phone screen. He wondered what she would remember about him when she was older. Would she remember the way he packed her lunch, or how he forgot birthdays sometimes but never the little things that mattered? He wanted his 60-year-old self to remember her laughter the way it was now, light and untamed. He wanted to tell his future self not to grow too cautious, not to build walls out of worry. "Let her see you laugh," he wrote. "Even when life feels smaller, let her see that wonder still lives in you." By noon, the rain had stopped, and sunlight began to break through the clouds, falling in long, uneven streaks across his desk. He closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the silence that followed rain, the kind that felt alive, humming with invisible things. He thought about the future again. About how one day he would wake up and be 60, perhaps on another rainy morning like this. Maybe the letter would still be tucked in a drawer somewhere, yellowed around the edges. Maybe he would have forgotten about it entirely, only to find it years later when searching for something else. He smiled at the thought. Maybe the letter would be less about remembering and more about rediscovering. He wrote slower now, careful with each word. If you are reading this, I hope you are still curious. I hope you still stand in the rain sometimes, still get lost in a book, still believe that there is beauty in the ordinary. I hope you have forgiven yourself for all the ways you tried too hard. I hope you still write, not for anyone else, but because it reminds you who you are. He didn't notice the hours passing. The light outside shifted from gold to amber, and shadows stretched long across the room. He wrote until his hand cramped, until the words began to feel like breathing. When he was done, he sat quietly for a long time, reading what he had written, not editing, just listening. The letter wasn't perfect, but then again, neither was life. It wasn't meant to be. He folded the pages neatly, tied them with a thin ribbon, and placed them in a wooden box where he kept old photographs and postcards. He looked at the box for a while, then whispered, almost to himself, "For when I forget." There was peace in that moment, the kind that didn't come from certainty but from acceptance. Years passed. Seasons cycled through the garden outside his window. The lemon tree grew taller, and its blossoms returned each spring. Time, ever silent, carried him forward. Isabel went to college, then moved to another city. He grew older, slower, but still woke early to write, to watch the sunrise, to water the plants. The pen remained his quiet companion through everything. Then one autumn morning, at 60, Elias found the box again. It was tucked beneath old books and forgotten receipts, the ribbon faded, the paper fragile to the touch. He sat by the same oak desk, though now the wood had darkened with age, and the air smelled faintly of rain again, as though time had folded upon itself. He opened the letter slowly, careful not to tear the edges. His hands trembled, not from weakness but from the tenderness of memory. He read each line as though tracing footprints he had once left in sand. Some words made him smile, others made his chest tighten. There were things he had done, and things he hadn't. He had learned that not all dreams were meant to be reached, some were meant to guide. He had lost friends, gained others, seen his daughter build a life of her own. He had fallen in love again, quietly, with someone who understood the language of silence. When he reached the final lines, he paused. "I hope you still stand in the rain sometimes." He laughed softly, looking out the window. The rain had returned, gentle and familiar. He stood, walked outside, and let the drizzle touch his face. The air smelled of earth and lemon blossoms. The years between 40 and 60 seemed to dissolve into the mist, leaving only the simple truth that he was still here. And in that moment, standing beneath the same tree that had seen every version of him, he realized what the letter had always been about. It wasn't a message to the future, it was a promise to stay alive inside his own story. He closed his eyes, feeling the rain trace his wrinkles like gentle reminders of time well spent. The world was quiet except for the sound of falling water and the whisper of leaves. He thought about the man who had written those words long ago, full of questions and hope. He thought about all the ways life had surprised him, how it had broken and mended him in equal measure. When he went back inside, he placed the letter back into the box, this time with a small note on top. It read simply, "For whoever finds this next, write your own." He smiled, knowing that someday, someone else would sit by this same window, in this same quiet, and wonder who they might become. Elias sat down, the pen still in his hand, and began to write again. Not to the past, not to the future, but to the present, to the life still unfolding, to the rain still falling. And somewhere between the ink and the silence, he understood that growing older wasn't about leaving things behind, it was about carrying them differently. That night, when he finally put the pen down, he felt no longing, no regret. Only gratitude, the kind that fills the spaces time leaves behind. He whispered softly, "Thank you," not knowing whether he was speaking to his younger self, his older self, or to life itself. The rain continued through the night, steady and kind. In the morning, sunlight touched the window again, just as it had all those years ago, and the world outside shimmered with quiet promise. Elias smiled. He had made it, not to some destination, but to this moment, alive and unafraid to remember. And that was enough.